Yo, what up? Got another book review for you. This time we have Italo Calvino's If on a Winter's Night, a Traveler. I always get the title wrong. I just started calling it Winter's Night to myself because it's a little long of a title, but my first book by him, I hadn't really heard about him until I was on the West Coast. I started seeing his name around at the bookstores, and I'd never heard of it and never really seen it anywhere else. And so I started doing some research, learning more about him, and kind of realized I wanted to read something that he'd written. So when I was in Montana, I think, I came across this awesome book set, 3 of his books, which include this, Invisible Cities, and The Baron and the Trees. They hadn't even priced it yet, and so I got all 3 books in the box set for only $10. So it was something that I felt like I couldn't pass up. They were in perfect condition. Looked like they hadn't even been read yet. So I didn't do any underlining in this because almost the first edition. It came out in 1981. It was originally published in 1979. The English translation came out in 1981. So I just, since it's a box set, obviously it's not a first edition, but it came out the same year. So I didn't want to mess anything up, and I love the design. It's absolutely beautiful. I love the font. I love everything about it. It's great. Everything. Yeah, and then even the font of the chapters, of each chapter. Where's the chapter? Oh, like this. Yeah, I just love the whole design of this. It was great. Definitely a very experimental narrative type of story. It's metafiction, breaking the fourth wall, very aware of itself, stories within a story within a story, which I love books about books. So I haven't really gotten much into metafiction, so this is me kind of dipping my toes in there. I do want to get to more. I started Epitaph of a Small Winter by Deasis, and I'm pretty sure that's metafiction. I'm at the very beginning. And then I also have House of Leaves that I want to start, and that is also metafiction. But yeah, I haven't really been in the mood for a long book. I've been wanting to start a long book, but I just haven't been in the mood for it. I don't know why. So I've been reading some like 250 page books, and yeah, this was one of them. And so a little bit about Calvino, since I haven't done a video about him. I finally did a little author bio. He was born in 1923 and passed in 1985. His most known works are the Our Ancestors trilogy, which includes Cosmic Comics, Invisible Cities, and Winter's Night. Those were published in 65, 72, and then this one was 79. His literary style is neo-realism, postmodernism. At the time of his death, he was the most translated Italian author. I guess I should have said that he's Italian, which I think it's kind of ironic that his name is Italio and he's Italian, so it makes it easy to remember that he's Italian. A little bit about his life. His family's farm pioneered the cultivation of avocado and grapefruit. His parents are the reason we have avocados. And he grew up on the beliefs of Freemasonry, anarchism, Marxism, free thinking. He went to a Christian school, but he didn't really follow the religion. Was forced into the army, into the Italian invasion of the French Riviera in 1940. He then attended the University of Turin, I'm not sure if that's how you pronounce it, Turin, for agriculture in 1941, then going to the University of Florence in 1943. Eventually refused military and went into hiding because, World War II was like 1940 to 1944. He ended up joining the Italian resistance for 20 months. His parents were even held hostage by the Nazis, where they tended to shoot his father like 3 different times in front of his mother while he was in the resistance and away from his parents. After all that settled down and the war was over, he returned to Turin, where he had some short stories published, and he officially entered the literary world and started getting some recognition. But because of all these political and wars and revolutions he grew up in, he gravitated towards post-war political life, where he was writing for magazines and was really involved in like politics and literary side of things. But his first book was The Path to the Nest of Spiders, which was published in 1947. He even got to interview Hemingway while he was working for one of these magazines and ended up becoming a consulting editor. Then he wrote another book called The Cloven Viscount, I think. I might be misreading my handwriting. And that looks like it was in 1957. He ended up leaving the Communist Party after Soviet invasion of Hungary. Withdrew from politics. So from World War II until about 1957, he was really involved in politics and writing literary magazines, being on the back end, you know, doing writing and editing and like just being part of the publication of magazines. He wrote Baron in the Trees in 1957 as well. Visited the US for 6 months, but spent most of his time around New York City. He even started this literary group called Oulipo. It's Oulipo. I might be pronouncing that wrong. Where he met Raymond Queneau, who I've heard of, Roland Barthes, who I've also heard of, and George Perec, which he has a book that I want to read. Can't think of the name right now, but so, and then for the rest of his life, he mainly just traveled around and lectured with either solo or with one of these people in this literary group, and ended up dying of a cerebral hemorrhage in 1985. He ended up becoming very well known, won a bunch of awards. I didn't write any of the awards down, I should have. But yeah, super interesting guy, great writer. Reading this, it felt like it could have been written yesterday. It felt really modern, very conversationalist. My favorite thing about this probably was how it was like short stories. Like every other chapter was a different short story. And so the majority of this book, the main character, who's called the Reader, and the other main character called the Other Reader, who she actually has a name. They like meet at a bookstore after they both realize that the book they bought isn't the book they bought. After reading it, there was a problem with the publisher, and so they kind of go on this wild goose chase of trying to find the rest of the story. And then every time they find a new story, and then a new story, and a new story, and a new story. And so, and it just keeps on going and going and going. He really starts dissecting like the relationship between reader and writer, and the relationships between publishers and writers, and really hard to explain just because of that. I mean, it's funny, it doesn't take itself too seriously. It's really cool to see his different genres and writing styles with each new short story. It kind of made me appreciate short stories a lot more. I'm not much of a short story reader, but he really knows how to end a short story, especially with these. Probably my favorite way to end short stories. They're kind of like a cliffhanger, but not at the same time, just kind of super satisfying for me anyways. But it's a very interesting read, and I highly suggest it to anyone who's interested in experimental narrative, metafiction, and writers talking about writing, writers talking about reading, the processes of writing, the relationship between reader and writer and publishers, and definitely worth the read. I gave it a 4.25 out of 5. I liked it. It was good. I was kind of expecting a little more. It was definitely overall good with some great parts sprinkled out. The ending of the whole book was a little unsatisfying for me. It makes sense because he even like eventually tells you there's only 2 ways to end something, and he chooses one of those ways. So I wish I could have written in this, because I mean, it's definitely one of those books that you'll want to reread and pick up on the nuances. And there were some passages that I really wish I could have underlined, and now looking back, I wish I could have, but I really didn't want to ruin this beautiful copy. So I plan on eventually getting another copy and writing all in it. I want to read more of him. I'm definitely going to get to Baron in the Trees and Invisible Cities. Not sure which one. Probably whichever one is shorter later in the year. That's Italo Calvino's If on a Winter's Night, a Traveler. Recently I also finished Therese Raquin by Emile Zola, and The Myth of Sisyphus by Albert Camus, which took me like 2 years to actually read all of, so I'm excited to get that to you. And I'll be making those videos soon and getting those out to you. Thanks for sticking with me. Peace.